What therapists notice when a story changes. 3 weeks ago, Daniel told the story one way. Today, he's telling it differently. The argument happened after work. His partner overreacted. He stayed calm. And honestly, he wasn't that bothered by it. At least, that's how he remembers it. Then, a few weeks later, the story comes up again. The argument still happened after work. His partner still got upset. Most of the details are the same. But this time, something is different. Daniel mentions that he'd been feeling exhausted for months. He says he felt unappreciated. He admits he went quiet for the rest of the evening. And for the first time, he says, "I think I was actually quite hurt." The therapist notices. Not because Daniel got the facts wrong. Not because one version of the story is true and the other is false. But because something important has changed. His understanding. Most people assume memories work like recordings, as though we simply replay what happened. But that's rarely how human experience works. When people first tell a story, they're often telling it from the place they're currently standing. Sometimes, anger is easier to access than sadness. Sometimes, frustration arrives before disappointment. Sometimes, blame feels safer than vulnerability. So the story reflects what is available in that moment. Then, therapy continues. Life continues. New thoughts emerge. New feelings emerge. And gradually, the story begins to change. Details that once felt important become less important. Details that barely seemed relevant suddenly move to the center. The event hasn't changed, but the meaning has. Therapists become very curious about these moments because they often signal movement. A person is seeing something they couldn't see before, feeling something they couldn't feel before, understanding something they couldn't understand before. Sometimes a client spends months talking about an argument, before eventually realizing it was never really about the argument. It was about feeling invisible, or rejected, or unimportant. The story changes because the understanding changes. And this is one reason therapists rarely rush to conclusions. The first version of a story is important, but it is rarely the final version. People are constantly discovering new things about their experiences, new emotions, new meanings, new perspectives. The story evolves because the person evolves. And often, some of the most meaningful moments in therapy happen when someone suddenly hears themselves tell a familiar story in a completely different way. Not because the facts have changed, but because they have. Sometimes a story changes because new understanding emerges. But sometimes something else happens. A person says two things that don't seem to fit together at all. And yet somehow, both feel true. In our next episode, we'll explore why contradictions matter in therapy.